Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm back with Ben, and we are talking about the importance of having a quarterly planning meeting. This is like a keystone habit for any business owner that I think is critical for gym owners because so often you get stuck working in the business every day. We really, really strongly recommend that at least once a quarter, you have this quarterly planning process where you step out of the business, think about the big picture, and set your priorities for the next 3 months. And so if you don't have this yet, or you have it, but it's not really working for you, this is a great episode if you want to feel more organized, be clear about your priorities, and get more done with less stress. So if that sounds like something you want, keep on listening, my friend. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Before we jump into today's call, I want to just let you know about a very exciting webinar we have coming up. We're calling it the Gym Lead Blueprint webinar, which is a mouthful, but it's a really cool webinar that's coming up. And it's coming up September 9th at 10 o'clock Eastern. And what we're going to teach you is 5 ways to generate more leads this month in less than 3 hours per week. I know that's a very kind of spammy headline, but we want to actually be really descriptive and say, if you need more leads and you're willing to take action in the next month and you only have maybe 3 hours per week to do it, we're going to give you a blueprint for exactly the action you want to take to generate more leads. It's a kind of virtual webinar. You also will get the recording if you attend live only, and you can claim your spot by clicking the link down below in the show notes. It's $47 if you act now. And again, it's September 9th, 10 a.m. with Mr. Mark Fisher, and it's a Gym Lead Blueprint webinar. Hope to see you there. That brings me to today's episode, which is with Ben Pickard. What's up, my friend?
Hey, how you doing?
So good to see you. We were just talking about our weekends, and it seems like you had a fun weekend with the family. I had a fun weekend with family. What did you all get up to?
Yes, my 12-year-old, who some of you listeners may know about because I mentioned it before, and some of you may not, is the proud owner of a new to him dirt bike, and we spent a lot of time learning how to use a clutch. And
you are so brave.
He chirped me too. I was like, Liam, you're going to stall it a lot. Learning how to use the clutch is hard. And then after a few laps, he's like, Dad, I thought you said this was hard. And I'm like, son of a bitch.
That's hilarious. You're so brave teaching a 12-year-old to ride a motorcycle. But I think we talked about this before. I also had a motorcycle growing up, and I think I got mine right around the same time. And I remember struggling with the clutch at first, but Liam's getting it. That's exciting. And good for you. Good for you.
Thank you.
I also had a good weekend. I had my in-laws in town, and we had a dinner party at my house. You know, one of my favorite things to do when I have downtime is to host. I love hosting. I love cooking. So we had a 10-person dinner party on Saturday night, which was super fun.
And you don't just love hosting. You're an incredible host.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I like it. I like hospitality. I love food and talking. You know, those are my favorite things. And so that's what I'm meant to do. Yeah. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about it today. So today, the topic we want to cover is the importance of quarterly planning. Quarterly planning has been one of those things that we have done at Mark Fisher Fitness for years. You've done in your gym for years. We do at Business for Unicorns. And it's one of the core habits that we try to build in all of our Unicorn Society members, which is the idea that every 3 months, you are sitting down and going through a specific process to figure out what are your top priorities. I think this is a habit, I can speak for myself, that has been an absolute game changer in my life as an entrepreneur. I wouldn't ever run a business without doing this ever again in my life. And so you maybe just want to share your experience, Ben, about what has made this such a powerful habit for you in your work.
Well, ditto to everything you said, plus one. I think what the real core for me of why this has been valuable is, for me, it connects the long-term goals and the things that I can feel in my heart of hearts when it comes to my business.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to fucking do now.
Yes.
And yes, we'll talk more about this, and there's all sorts of other benefits to quarterly planning. But I talk to so many gym owners who are like, I need to work more on the business instead of in the business. And with all the love in the world, I'd hazard a guess that they don't know you may not know what working on the business actually looks like.
Yes.
Sometimes working on the business is like blocking off a whole day or half a day, depending how efficient you are, to be like, what are we going to focus on? Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
what does that look like? Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be accountable for that? Okay, and what are those deadlines going to look like rather than just like, we're going to do a community event.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing it? How's it align with the goals? Who's invited? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many other aspects. And if you don't take the time to plan these things out, like, you're really just shooting from the hip. And sometimes you get a bullseye when you shoot from the hip. No
Sure.
shame.
Yep.
Sometimes you miss the mark by a mile and
Yeah.
then you're disappointed. And this is why committing to a system like this can be so important, because it lets you know what you're supposed to be actually doing.
100%. And I think that there is something, at least in my experience, I think you'll agree with this, magical about every 3 months or 12 weeks, right? Thinking through your goals in 6 month or 12-month cycles is too long. Right. And you should have some annual goals. You should, enter a year as a business knowing what you want to accomplish by the end of that year. But that doesn't really drive action, right? It feels like a little too far away to actually inspire action. So when we're talking about quarterly projects, it's why we actually call them projects and not quarterly goals, right? Because at the year level, you're thinking about where are we heading, what we want our revenue to be, how many members do we want our gym to have, maybe what we want our team to look like, how many leads are we generating over the course of the year. You're thinking pretty big picture about where you're going, how you're growing. But we're doing quarterly projects. Is this where the rubber meets the road? And our dreams kind of come smashing into reality. And we say, okay, for the next 12 weeks, what are we going to do? What is the action we're going to take? What are the projects we're going to execute on that are going to get us to those goals by the end of the year? And I think it's that kind of spirit of like defining the action we're going to take that feels so tactical, so satisfying, and really keeps us focused day to day on what does it look like for me this week to work on the business in the most effective way possible. So, anything you would add to that?
No, that was beautifully said.
Thanks. Well, we've been talking about this for a long time because we love it. So let's just dive into kind of our process. So we have a playbook for this, of course, for all our Unicorn Sunday members for how to do quarterly planning. And Ben is the master of this. And so can you just walk through the logistics of like, how do you set yourself up? Like, what does it look like to do good quarterly planning from a logistics perspective?
Yeah, of course. So the very first step is you need to book the time.
Yeah.
So when I do quarterly planning at my gym, the last step of our agenda, because we obviously always go off an agenda, otherwise I don't know what the hell we're doing. And then my GM gives me flack because I talk too much and we're late, but that's beside the point. The last step of our agenda is book next quarter's meeting.
Yeah.
So the meeting isn't done until we got the next meeting on the books. If you're doing this for the first time, the first step is just put the time on the books. So I'd suggest probably booking. I think you can get this done in 3 to 4 hours and still do a really good job. Maybe even 2.5 if you're like just the owner and maybe one other person doing it. But I would probably book like 5 hours just to be safe. And the perfect time frame in my mind is book it 1 to 2 weeks before the end of the current quarter. So if I was planning for Q4 in my gym, I would be booking quarterly planning between September 15th and 30th. And that gives you enough time that you've had enough of the quarter to like kind of know where you're at. But it's also not so last minute before the next quarter that you're like scrambling early October to figure out what the hell you're supposed to be doing that week.
Yeah, 100%. I think, in many cases at MFF, we've tried to like plan our quarterly planning at the start of the year. We try to do that business for unicorns as much as humanly possible. We just say at the beginning of the year, here are the 4 dates. Here's one in March, in June, September, December, and we just know it's the final month of each quarter. We're going to meet and talk about the quarter and plan for the next one. And it's that cyclical nature that once you've set this up and you've done it for a year or two, you're going to forget that you ever didn't do it. It's going to feel like, yeah, of course we have time for this. We always make time for this. And spending 3 to 4 hours a quarter on big picture planning of where you're heading, what projects are you focused on, what your metrics look like, that's the minimum amount we should be spending on creating strategy and figure out how we're going to work on the business. So I think it's just kind of a critical habit. Okay, so those are the logistics of getting on the schedule, planning enough time. Who should be there? Who should be at this meeting?
So this is a really good question because it can vary. So I think the best answer is probably your leadership team. And I know that's kind of like a very nebulous way of phrasing it in the first place. But I'd say anyone who manages a core function of your business.
Yeah.
You can do this as your whole team, and with all respect due to your part-time trainers, like they probably just don't care enough and aren't involved enough to really have.
Yeah. I would go so far as to say no part-time people should be coming to this.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. That sounds good.
Yeah. Unless the only exception I would make is like if your business partner is also like your spouse and helps in the business and they're kind of part-time, I could see inviting them. But anyone else is just truly a part-time, they're there 1 or 2 days a week kind of person. They're not going to have enough context for how to be helpful in this meeting. So at the very least, full-time folks. Sorry, I interrupted, but I want to just like put my foot down and say, no, no part-timers.
I was being too nice. We needed that foot down. Yeah, so managing a core function. I think for most gyms, that's going to look like the owner or owners, depending if there's 2 or 3 or multiple.
Yeah.
Then I could see having like an office manager type role.
Yeah.
Granted, if they're like part-time office manager 5 hours a week, part-time trainer 10 hours a week, part-time some other business, they don't need to attend. But if you have someone who's like an admin support for you and is your right-hand person, it makes sense for them to be there.
Yeah.
And then that's probably also going to be like a lead coach or a head coach type role.
Mm-hmm.
So like owner, admin, head coach, and that kind of covers most elements of it. If your gym is robust enough to have a dedicated marketing or salesperson, it would make sense for them to be there as well. That's just less common than like a head coach. Because then you have the voice of the trainers, you have the voice of operations, the owner's usually handling sales and marketing, or like a GM type role obviously is a good fit for this too. So you've kind of captured the buckets of like sales and marketing and operations, and then technically finances, but there's not usually a lot to discuss finance-wise in a gym.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the way I usually summarize is saying like anyone that manages other people or processes in your gym, if they manage some person or some process, then I think that they probably have a voice. And you really want anyone at this meeting who might be what we'll describe as like a captain of a project. So if there's someone who might actually, be in charge of getting some of the results you want each quarter, and they're going to really contribute in a meaningful way, they should be there to have a say in how the project gets defined, et cetera. We'll talk more about that in a second. But okay, great.
Hey there, Business for Unicorns podcast listeners. I'm just making absolutely sure you have already gotten your free, instantly downloadable copy of my new book, The Little Book of Gym Marketing Secrets. You can find a link to download it in the show notes, or you can go to gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. I worked super hard to make sure this is a less than a 30-minute read and is a comprehensive overview of all the things you need to do to grow your gym, get more leads, more clients, and importantly, change more lives. Again, find the link in the show notes where you can download your free copy at gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. And now back to the podcast.
But okay, great. So we know you got to make time for it. We know who needs to be there. Let's maybe just walk us through kind of what the agenda is. You said a few minutes ago, it's important to have an agenda so you know how to do this. And we really have a very specific way of doing this. And we probably won't have time to go into lots of detail. Certainly if y'all listening want to become a Unicorn Study member, you'll get all of this. But for this podcast, let's just talk at a very high level. What are the kinds of things that you put on the agenda for a quarterly planning meeting?
Yeah, so in broad strokes, you want to do some sort of icebreaker. We usually do what's called gains, which is from Dan Sullivan's The Gap in the Gain. We're talking about all the wins. We put ourselves in a state of optimism and we can do this for the coming quarter. Because let's be honest, running a business ain't no cakewalk.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a little Pulp Fiction adrenaline boost to the heart to feel like you can do the thing.
You're dating yourself with a Pulp Fiction reference. Good for you.
Don't have gray hairs yet, Michael. Then you want to do some sort of like reflection. If you're partway through the year, it's like, what were our goals? Let's remind ourselves of that. How did last quarter go? Where do we want to accomplish? Let's make sure we're all, singing from the same songbook. Then if it's annual planning, which is the one you do in December, planning for the next year, you'd be setting some goals and what we call a wish list, but where do you want to go 3 years from now? And if it's non-annual planning, then you'd move into like creating your projects. So to start again, icebreaker, reflection, create your projects. That's kind of like a good chunk of the meeting. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you'll move on to handling what are the remaining issues and opportunities in your business, which is Framework for Unicorns speak for things that we need to talk about. Mm-hmm. And it's been getting people on the same page for everything from programming systems to marketing to hiring to firing to values alignment, all of the things, but it's an open forum discussion where the way I word this is you are speaking on behalf of your business because although it is arguably a living, breathing thing, it can't talk to you. You have to speak for it. And if you're not willing to say the things, you're going to continue to have the problems.
Yeah, well said, my friend. Well, let's just pause there and just recap, because I love the way you started off with saying it really is important to do some sort of Kickstarter, brainstorm, something that, like, conversation starter to get inside to get in the room. Because I think so often when you get into a space that's meant for quarterly planning, it requires you to, like, put everything else away. Right. It requires you to, like, any distractions you have for the day, right? Anything else that's going on, maybe, like, actually put your computers away, your phones away, right? Quarterly planning is, I don't want to say it's like a sacred space. It's like pushing it too far, right? But, but it's a focused space, right? It's a space where you have to have your full brain available to do some real creative, long-term thinking and problem solving. And you can't do that if it's just treated like every other meeting where everyone's running from thing to thing, right? So I think getting inside the room and doing some sort of conversation starter, Kickstarter, is really important. Then I love the first few things you put on the agenda are like a backwards glance. So before we talk about the next quarter, let's go back and look at our performance from the last quarter. So can you just dig into that, like, a little bit more? When you're doing this backwards glance and looking at how do we perform last quarter, what are some things you're looking at and reflecting on?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at, did we do the things we said we were going to do? Like, if we had 3 to 5 projects for the quarter and only one of them got done, like, we should probably talk about what's operationally holding us back.
Yep.
So that might be a thing that goes on the issues and opportunities to discuss. I'd also want to be looking at like almost everything in our business is a lead indicator, which means it's like a nutrition habit equivalent of like eating more protein or eating less calories or whatever. They're actions we can take that align with the outcome we want to get to, but there's no actual guarantees. Almost everything is a lead indicator. So when we make a project to, like, do a charity boot camp, we also want to talk about, like, did it work? Mm-hmm. Like, not only did we do it, but was it worthwhile? And should we do it again? Should this become part of our annual marketing calendar? Or is this like a fun thing we did that we're not going to do again because it was kind of a waste of time, even though we supported the charity that we like?
Yeah.
So we want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. I think what you're reflecting back on is, like, let's look at all the effort, all the projects we put in. We'll look at our dashboards. We'll look at any metrics that we have for all the effort we put in. And let's also look at our outcomes. We might have, like, done the event, like you said. We might have done the charity event, but did it produce the leads that we want it to? We might have run that marketing campaign or that referral campaign, but did it generate the referrals we wanted it to? Right. So I think looking back at both your efforts and your outcomes in the last quarter and learning from these successes, saying, oh, that really did fucking work. Let's do that again tomorrow. That really did work. Let's do that every spring, whatever that, and that really didn't work. Okay, let's take some time to put on the issues and opportunities list and figure out what went wrong. Where did we go wrong? What lessons can we take away from that? And it's that kind of reflection every quarter that really helps your gym and your team become what is often referred to in, like, the research literature, like a learning organization. Right? We all talk about the idea that we want to keep learning and growing as leaders and as teams. And that this is part of how you do it, is once a quarter learning from your own behaviors. And so I think that's really critical. So after you're done reflecting back, then you talk about moving forward, defining your projects, and then working through issues and opportunities. Can you just say a little bit more about how that goes? How do you do that?
Yes, when it comes to the projects, we do a process called Keep, Kill, Combine, where kind of the quick and dirty version of this is we all take a couple minutes, all being everyone at the table for quarterly planning, take a few minutes to independently on separate documents, write down what do we think the most important projects are for the business. And we can pick, 3 to 5 of them based on how did we do last quarter, how on track we are for our goals, how you feel on that day. It can be all sorts of variables.
Yeah.
And then we all take our separate lists and combine them into one list. And that might have, maybe Michael says we should do a charity thing and I say we should do a charity thing. So we don't need to write that twice. That would be a combined. They get smushed together because they're the same thing. And then we just go through the list. Are we going to keep this? It's a candidate. Are we going to kill this? Maybe it's not project worthy, which I don't know if we're going to have time today to talk about, but some things don't have to become a project.
Yep.
Or does this get combined with other things? Maybe I say we need to get more leads. That's a project, but I don't know the answer. And Michael's like, I would like to get more leads via this charity event. That'd be another example of things being combined because they're serving the same outcome.
Yeah.
And we just go through that list multiple times until we get it down to, like, the top 3 to 5 projects. And I keep saying 3 to 5, and I want to hammer home the point. In my experience, less is better. If you have one project, you're going to get that done. If you have 5 projects, one of them is probably going to be a little wonky. If you have 8 projects, you're probably still going to only get done 3 or 4 anyways.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. Is the whole point of this quarterly planning is to give you and your team focus for the next quarter, to say, what are the most important things we're going to spend time on when we're not doing our regular day-to-day jobs, right? If we're not, just delivering, services to our clients, what are we going to focus on? And Ben's point is right here. We want 3 to 5, probably closer to 3 priorities that are going to be the most important things we work on for the quarter. And that's the whole point of this process, right? Is to leave there with that kind of clarity of what we're going to work on, who's going to captain each project, who's really running with the ball first. And then, we have other tips and tricks for how we get people to execute on that. But really the quarterly planning process, the most important outcome of it is that you're moving into the next quarter clear about the top 3 to 5 things that are going to be most important. And then you mentioned spending a little time in this meeting focusing on what we call issues and opportunities. Can you just talk through how does that function at a high level?
Yeah. So this is a tough one. Tough's the wrong word. This can be challenging, and it takes a little bit of practice because it really does require candor.
Yeah.
So there's a process called IDS, identify, discuss, solve. A lot of us have been taught in previous jobs that you want to come with solutions, not problems. And although there's a lot of value to that, this process is all about why does this matter? What's the problem? And then we want to talk about why do we care? So what? And then we want to move to what's the next step for it. Because, if you were to put on a suggestion, I think we should do more email marketing, that's a solution. What you really want to say is, we're not getting enough leads, and that because we're not getting enough leads, we're not making enough money. That's the real core issue here.
Yeah.
So when and sometimes this can be hard, and this is why we recommend the leadership team, because as one of my mentors would say, sometimes you got to put your adult pants on and say the hard thing, and you got to also hear the hard thing. So it's what's really the problem here?
Yeah. I think it's a great way of thinking about it, Ben. And the call to action we're suggesting here is that once a quarter, when you're doing this quarterly planning, you got to come with a list of stuff that's not working in the business, right? We're calling issues. And there's also the other side of that, things you really want to do, things you really want to change, opportunities you really want to take advantage of. And that list of issues and opportunities requires a lot of candor from you and anyone else in this meeting to say, there's some stuff that's really broken. There's some stuff that's really not working. And there's also some brilliant ideas we have that we haven't spent any time on. We haven't really vetted, right? And so part of your quarterly planning process is unearthing this list and working through it. Spending time during this, 3-4 hours, as Ben suggested, trying to decide, okay, how do we fix some of these things that are broken? And how do we start to leverage or vet some of these opportunities that we see dangling? And I think that's a really critical part of quarterly planning, is really airing out the dirty laundry once a quarter and trying to sort it in a way that helps you move forward more effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. And a really hard part of this too is probably what makes you a good entrepreneur is that you've got a lot of ideas. And that means that you can't execute on all the things. So the solution to a lot of the stuff on the issues and opportunities list is actually do nothing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's everything. There's issues that need to be addressed and opportunities you want to capitalize on. Yeah. But a lot of times you're going to have way more things than you actually have the capacity to do. And that's okay. The whole reason this process exists is to put them into a hierarchy to decide what's mission critical, what's really going to get you to the goals, or conversely, if you didn't do it, the cost is not getting to your goals, and what's the nice to haves.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of entrepreneurial maturity. Is that a term? Should we coin that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it does. It's a lot of leadership experience to be able to tell the signal from the noise. What is the stuff that really matters? That deserves our time and attention, and what is the stuff that's just noisy and and would feel good or be a quick win, but really doesn't move the needle forward, right? And knowing the difference is frankly more art than science, and it depends on all kinds of factors. But I think generally speaking, what we're trying to drive home here is that some portion of your quarterly planning every 3 months needs to be dedicated to airing out all your issues and laying out all your opportunities and deciding what are we going to act on, what are we not going to act on, so you can move into the next 3 months with real clarity about your priorities. And then you're going to do that in 3 more months again. Then you're going to do that in 3 more months again, forever. right? This is a process that goes on and on and on and becomes a really important rhythm in your business to keep getting clarity. It's, often in the analogy I use, I don't know if you feel this way. I'm someone who does my to-do list handwritten. And after a few days, my to-do list can get a little muddy. And there's like a few pages of like, I don't know, crossed off things I can't read, etc. And if I spend just like 5 minutes rewriting my to-do list and reorganize them on a fresh piece of paper, I'm like a new person. I feel like an optimism that I didn't think was possible 5 minutes before I started this exercise, right? And I go into the next day just that more focused and driven. That's what quarterly planning feels like, right? Is that all this change happens and confusion and lists on different pages. Then you get into quarterly planning, you lay it all out there, talk about it, reorganize it, put it back in order that makes sense again, know where your priorities are. Then you can jump into the next 3 months just feeling like a fresh, reinvigorated new person. That's my experience of it. Does that resonate with you at all, Ben?
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. That resonates perfectly.
Yeah.
It's the quarterly equivalent of prepping your to-dos the night before.
Yeah, totally. Or my husband would say it's like having a closet full of freshly folded laundry. Right? It's like
that does it for him.
It doesn't resonate with me, that one, but I get it. It's just like, you really set yourself up to succeed over the next few weeks and months, and so let's leave it there. We could keep talking about this topic for literally hours because there's a lot more to say. But I think generally speaking, if I was going to offer just the quickest recap, is make time for this. Every quarter, schedule it in advance, have an agenda based on some of the suggestions we have here today, and keep doing it until you find a version that really feels successful to you. Anything else you would add to that, Ben?
Yeah, and then once you find that successful version, never stop. This becomes the most important day in your business, bar none. If you really want to move to like true business owner, to use the jargon that we see out there a lot, that you have a business, not a job, like this is a thing you will probably do every quarter forever, unless, of course, you can like truly replace yourself. But it is absolutely critical for success and will reduce so much stress and anxiety while getting better results.
Well said, my friend. Great. Well, let's leave it there. Friends, if you want to more information about generating more leads, please go click the link below in the show notes and attend our Gym Lead Blueprint webinar. Again, September 9th, 10 a.m. Eastern. If you claim your spot right now, it's only $47 for this literally 2-hour workshop with Mark Fisher to generate more leads. And so go click the button now, and I'll see you on the next one. Ben, have a good one.
Bye.